So how do you handle it when you have disappointment or something come up and you really want to process with your partner, but it might not be the best thing? We're going to be talking about that today with Matie from selfservetoys.com and Hunter Riley, who works at Self-Serve and also has hunterrileysexeducation.com.
That's true.
And I'm Cathy Bartoli from theintimacydojo.com. So glad you guys are here.
So excited.
And this is Hunter's first video three-way.
And I'm in the middle.
Yeah,
pretty
it's
excited.
the best place.
And like a sandwich of
yeah,
love.
it's really
yes,
great.
Yeah. So it can be really hard. I know that I was brought up in a monogamous style. And the whole idea was you found this Prince Charming, or I was raised to look for Prince Charming, and that person would fill every need. And you could process with them and share your disappointments, and they'd ride in on the white horse and save you. And so sometimes it can be hard to remember to look for support elsewhere. And it's not always the best thing to I'm so disappointed with you. It's not always helpful to. I think we should always share what we're feeling, but maybe process with someone else first, and then share your truth with your partner afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's not what somebody needs to hear in that moment. It's hard enough to feel like you disappointed somebody, and then to have to caretake their response and their reaction and their feelings, when really you kind of want to just be able to hold that maybe you disappointed somebody, and that's hard for you too. So I really believe in circles of support and care, and it's really easy in those moments to not want to reach out for them. For me, sometimes I feel shame that somebody's not meeting all my needs, even though I know it's so practical. Of course someone's not going to meet all my needs. Nobody should meet all my needs. But when it's hard is sometimes the hardest time to say I need help. So
that shame is it's painful.
Yeah. And our culture is like, oh, you're together, you're happy. That's the end of the story, right? And
there's if you were good enough, if you were worthy of that love, they would automatically know your needs and fulfill them. Which
right, they can read your mind.
Yes, only if they truly love you.
Only if they really love you,
and you're really worthy of that love.
True love comes with mind reading, according to our cultural dialogue about relationships.
Yeah,
and intense mutual orgasms every single time you have sex.
Yeah, which leaves people very lost.
Yeah.
So who do you like to turn to? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I've got a group of girlfriends who are not, I have my girlfriends, and then I have my girlfriends, and I feel really fortunate to reach out to women and just be able to be vulnerable with each other. And what I found is often when I do that, they open up too, and all of us feel less alone, and all of us feel like we have somebody to share. And usually I can learn a lot from them too. There was a day a few months ago before I went through a big breakup that I drove home, and I was like, oh, I want to drink on a patio. It was a nice day. And I went and I realized I didn't have a lot of people I could call. And so I just went through my Facebook group page and said, there are people who I connect with, there are people who I care about, who I share politics with, who I share values with. And I sent out 4 messages to girls just being hey, you want to be my friend? And it worked. It worked. And now one of my very best friends is a woman that I reached out to when I was sad. Instead of reaching in to that sadness, I reached out in friendship, and it was amazing. And now I have her, and I hope I always will.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I feel like I'm very lucky that my coworkers are honestly one of my biggest, networks of support, and they always have been. And that might not be the case for everybody, and I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody.
Yeah, corporate America may not be the
corporate
place
America
to
may
process
not
sexual
be the place.
disappointments.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it is really incredible the amount of support I get from my coworkers, and what's nice too is, working in this industry, sometimes there's this perception of oh, well, your sex life is amazing all the time. And I'm like, no, I have my own shit. I'm processing stuff. I have my own expectations that I have to let go of. And so sometimes
humans.
Right, because humans, right, exactly. And so sometimes it's nice, to come into work and be hey, I'm having a hard time with this thing.
Yeah.
I have disappointment around something, or I have an expectation that I didn't know I had, and then I found it out that I had it.
The hard way.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get a lot of support from my coworkers and from my family. Again, on different topics, right? I'm not going to necessarily bring my non-monogamy stuff to my family, because sometimes they're just like, I don't know what to tell you, like,
or they might be. I don't know about your family, but mine would be really uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, and I think my family is just kind of like, hey, we accept that you do it, but I don't really know what to say,
Yeah.
So I think that's totally fair, right?
Yeah.
And again, choosing the circle of support when I'm having a hard time. If I'm having a hard time with something else, maybe, co-parenting my partner's child, I might go to my family because maybe my coworkers don't have experience with that, right? So it's really finding what issues I'm dealing with and which circle of support to talk to in that moment. But I think what Matie said about, if you have a partner and you're like, hey, I wanted to try this thing, and they're like, it's really not for me. Yeah. They have their own process of dealing with their feelings of feeling like they're disappointing you.
And they get to say no.
And they get to say no. And you have to, sort of suck it up for a moment and say, okay, thank you for taking care of yourself, or whatever your phrase is, and then sort of figure out how you're going to process your feelings from that point, because they're already dealing with the fact that they might feel inadequate, they might feel like they're disappointing you, they might be dealing with a lot of feelings themselves, and so asking them then to, oh, hey, could you also deal with all these other things is not really fair, and it also is maybe going to make them feel even worse. So I think that's an important point.
I think it's also really important to be honest with your partner, but you don't have to necessarily process the like, you can go through, you talk with your friends, you get calm, so you're not like crying or because if I'm really disappointed, I sometimes cry and and the person's like, oh my god, I just didn't want to try that dildo, and I'm like, oh. And if I can process it with my friends and like go back to my partner and say, I'm so glad you said no and took care of yourself, and I'm feeling some disappointment about this. So it's an honest, like, I'm being honest and open, I'm not hiding anything, but I'm also not, like having to like give them all my emotions about it, which often isn't about that dildo or that thing. It's about something else in my life that's not going well, but it just finds that crack in the...
Right, it piles up sometimes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also really found recently that I can actually reach out to my family in ways that are super surprising for me. Like my sister, who is monogamous, who is like super mainstream, who's married with a kid, and she's like my biggest cheerleader for poly stuff, because she just loves me and supports me and understands that her values are not my values. And that's been a really cool shift.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good point. If you're looking for a circle of support, don't assume somebody's into something or not into something. I like to use my words like, hey, Matie, I want to talk about this thing. Are you open to that? Or, hey, Hunter, I had this thing happen. I'm not sure if you'd be open. Can I at least ask you about the topic?
Right.
And sometimes you find the biggest supporters where you least expect it. And you will definitely find more supporters the more you ask. Like, you may not find everyone, but there's a risk in reaching out. Some people are like, no, I don't want to talk about that stuff. And they might leave your world, but for me, that's kind of like, okay, I'd rather know that now than after 10 years of investing in our relationship.
Well, and also, if you're processing with somebody and they really don't want to be hearing it, and let's say maybe they don't tell you that, but then their whole advice and their perspective on it is probably going to be skewed, because they're like, this is uncomfortable for me, I don't know what to say, so I'm just trying to say something to end this conversation, and then you might like walk away feeling kind of weird and like, well, I don't feel better, so there's that. So I think really checking in with somebody first to saying like, hey, are you comfortable with me talking about this with you is a really good step.
And finding people that are willing to say no.
Yeah. And finding people who say like, your feelings are valid. Because sometimes when you are working through something so directly with somebody, it's really hard for them to in the moment completely validate your emotions, you know, because they're having their emotions. They're
they're feeling defensive or ashamed or whatever.
Yeah, so it's really cool to talk to somebody else about it, and also like let go of that shame, and then have like your friend or a family or somebody just say like, your feelings are valid. Yeah, you're allowed to be disappointed. And being able to hold that sometimes for a little bit, like, helps me let go of it, you know?
Wonderful. Please leave comments below. How would you handle it? And do you have a circle of support? Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Congratulations on taking this time for yourself and learning these things. If you'd like to follow more of this, you can subscribe to my channel here. Social media is up here. And there's more videos of this type here. See you soon.